Hello, this is Steve White with RE/MAX Equity Group Realtors, and I'm here with my dear friend Al Egg. You were the chaplain for the Portland Trail Blazers for 35 years.
35 years, yeah.
You were here at Portland State University for how long?
This is my 38th season as chaplain of the Portland State football team, and I was chaplain of the Portland Beavers baseball team for 33 years until soccer run them out of town.
So
and you're a soccer guy.
Don't shoot the messenger. So talk to me in regards to how did you even get into the chaplain world and athletics?
I did not seek it. I did not ask anybody to help me get it. It was not my dream. I never dreamed about it. God did it. It's that simple. I was first asked to do baseball chapel when the founder of baseball chapel, Watson Spolstra, we call him Waddy, he's the grandfather of Eric Spolstra, the father of John Spolstra, right here in Portland. And Waddy decided to extend baseball chapel to the minor leagues in 1978. And he didn't know anybody in Portland, but he knew there was a AAA baseball team here. He knew one man, Bud Miller. And he called Bud and said, "Can you get me somebody to do chapel for..." Well, Bud knew me because he was the landlord of the office building I worked in, and we had discovered that we were both Christians. So we were spending time together at the office about once a week. And so he asked me if I would do this baseball chapel thing. I didn't know anything about that, but I did it. And then God began to place a call on my life for full-time ministry. I resisted that for 11 months. But finally in November of 1980, I was teaching in a home group in my church in a family room of a person's basement when, through some events, God just spoke clearly through a prophetic word from one of those young ladies, a college student, and just made it clear that the call was, in fact, from him. The reason I had resisted that for so long, Steve, is that Bud Miller had given me a tape of a pastor in Southern California, and that as I listened to it, and it was a year before this, I remember that the guy said, "There are many people in ministry today. Some were called, and some just went." I had to be sure that I was being called. God will bless both, but he's always going to bless those that are called. Those that just went, they may get the blessing and they may not. I couldn't risk that, so I had to make sure it was a call. And that night it became very, very, very clear that it was. So I said, "Yes, Lord, I'll be available to athletes and coaches." Because that's all I heard in the call to ministry, is that I was to be available to athletes and coaches. I was doing the Portland Beavers baseball chapel every home Sunday, and I had a Fellowship of Christian Athletes group at Aloha High School at the time. But other than that, I didn't know what sports ministry was about. And so I made the commitment on Sunday night. On Tuesday, I had one of those chance meetings downtown. I just happened to run into Michael Thompson. I had sold him a home 2 years before. We'd prayed together as we went through that process.
Go Realtors.
Yes, go Realtors. And so we're talking about his family back in the Bahamas. I didn't tell him what was going on. And out of the blue, yes, there is blue in November in Portland sometimes. Out of the blue, Michael said, "Al, if I can get some guys together on the team, would you lead a Bible study for us?"
With the Portland Trail Blazers.
With the Trailblazers. And I had just said, "Yes, Lord, I'll be available to athletes and coaches." I mean, what could I say to Michael? I had to respond. 2 days later, Thursday night, I got a phone call from Kurt Wilmarth, who's now home with the Lord, and Neil Lomax. They were at Portland State, and they called and said, "Al, we're trying to get a Bible study going on our football team. Would you lead it?" And I had just said, "Yes, Lord." So that's how the ministry began. We named it Beyond Victory Ministries.
And that's still the ministry today.
That's still the ministry today. And immediately I asked God, who am I to be accountable to? He showed me 6 men, one of whom was that Bud Miller, and who's now home with the Lord also. But that's how it all began. It started with Bible studies, one at Portland State, one with the Trailblazers. The next year, Kelvin Ramsey was a rookie with the Trailblazers. He got involved in the Bible study, and then one day he said, "Al, can we do chapel? Can we have a chapel service?" Well, I said, "Sure, we can do it every Sunday like they do in football and baseball." He said, "No, I want it every home game." And so he went to Jack Ramsey. Jack provided the room, was fully endorsing of it, provided the room for it, and we started the Blazer Chapel service. We believe we were the second or third team in the entire league to have a chapel. We know we were the first team to do it every home game. And other teams just followed until now.
Now, you do remember that when I was a little boy, you invited my father and I to come down to chapel, and I got to meet Michael Thompson and Julius Erving with the Philadelphia 76ers.
And Bobby Jones.
Yep, I got to meet them all.
If Philadelphia was in town, Bobby was always in chapel. One of my favorites. My wife Andy and I have stayed with Bobby and Tess in their home in North Carolina 2 or 3 different times, and just an all-time favorite player.
But in Portland, we've had a lot of high highs and low lows.
Oh, yes.
We've had the 90 and 92 championship runs. We've had the Jill Blazer era. Talk to me about what that's like, because you're on the inside.
Yeah.
Most people in
The
Portland...
championship runs were just full of excitement. We were so close, and yet stumbled with the Bulls. You know, Michael and Jordan was there, and Scottie Pippen, who later was a Blazer. I developed a great relationship with Pip when he was here, and had some interesting times with him. And Will Perdue was also with the Bulls then. Will was here. Will was, I happened to be at the practice facility, and I don't go there all the time. There's not much a chaplain can do during practice. But I was there the day Will got released. And his 17, I believe, 15 to 18 years, somewhere in there, career was over. I went in the locker room with him. There were some tears, and he's packing his bags, and he said, "Al, are you in town this week?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Can we have lunch or something?" I said, "What are you doing for dinner tonight?" He said, "Nothing. I just got released." And I said, "Well, come to my house for dinner." And I praise God that I have a wife that allows me to do that. So I went home and told her, and she fixed dinner, and Will came, and we had a nice evening meal together, and then sat in our family room and just shared about Jesus. And before Will left, he made a decision to pray a prayer of invitation, inviting Jesus to be Lord of his life. And it was an incredible time.
Now, what's it like, because you deal with people that are getting released, people that are coming in, so it's a very transient league. You have weddings, births of children, deaths that we've had here in Portland. Talk to us. How do you provide leadership to these people?
You just be available to them. The key to this kind of ministry, and let me back up again and say, I did not ask anybody to get me in with the Blazers. This was not something I was trying to do. God opened the door. He gave me 35 incredible years with the Blazers, and then he allowed it to end. And I'm fine with that. But the key to this kind of a ministry is 2 things: visibility and availability. I have to be visible enough so that they know who I am. That's especially key here at Portland State with the football team. I've got to be at practice as often as I can, not for the whole practice, but to make the rounds, slap some guys on the backside, say hi, give high fives, and that, so they know who I am. And then be available when they have a problem, when they're dealing with something. They know they can come to me because they've seen who I am. And that's the key to sports ministry, I believe. It certainly is for me. And, 35 years. Let's back up and talk about the Jailblazer time.
Please do.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that want to know what it's like.
That was one of the most interesting things I've ever experienced, because we did get the name Jailblazers. And we earned it.
We did.
A couple of guys earned it for us, okay? That year, we had 9, 10, or 11 players in chapel every single home game of that season. To our knowledge, that's the highest consistent chapel attendance in the history of the NBA up to that time. And yet that's when we became Jailblazers. Because the media focuses on the knothead stuff. They don't focus on the guys that are spending 20 minutes in a chapel service before a game. So I always thought that was really interesting, that we could have that highest attendance and at the same time become known as Jailblazers.
Now, real quick, give me 1 or 2 of the biggest challenges over the last 3 decades that you've had to face.
Saying goodbye to players that have been suddenly released or traded. It's always hard. It often involves some tears, and then trying to keep up with them after they're gone. Seeing them come through with a different team, that's never easy. But the relationship gets stronger, I think, after that, because we reflect back on the times that we had together before they had to depart our area. That would be one of the things. Working through the deaths, I've had a number of those. Jerome Kersey, I did his wedding and his funeral.
Oh, that's tough.
You know, that's not an easy thing to do. I did Duck's funeral. I did Bill Musselman's funeral. Coach Musselman, that was an incredible experience, and just the way God brought us together when I'd heard that he didn't allow chapel when he was the head coach in Minneapolis. So he comes here as an assistant, and I'm thinking, what's this going to do to my chapel? Am I going to be out? Am I gone now? But the first practice that we had after he got hired, I went right up to him, introduced myself. I asked him about his family. That's a key. We all like to talk about our families. And he was going through a situation where his daughter was engaged to a young man who was dealing with a brain aneurysm, as I recall. And I just said, well, I'm going to pray for him. What's his name? And he told me. And so every time I'd see him, I'd say, how's your daughter's boyfriend? How's that progressing? And it just gave us a relationship that later, when he was dealing with cancer, asked me to come to the hospital and then to his apartment. And we were able to pray with him a number of times. And then his wife asked me to do his memorial service.
And over that same period of time, give me one or two nuggets of the sweetest moments that you've had to experience.
Oh, just just having time with the guys, spending time away. I got to tell you an interesting story. You go to lunch with these guys. The Blazers, I'm not talking to the football now, but the Blazers, they're so recognizable in our city. I mean, it's Portland.
Yeah.
Everybody can recognize who the Blazers are. And you go to lunch and you get ready to leave and you ask for the bill and somebody says, oh, that's already been paid for that guy over there. He bought your lunch. It happens all the time because the guy wants to go back to his office and say, I just bought Clyde Drexler's lunch. He didn't have lunch with Clyde, but he doesn't tell his office that. He makes it bigger than it was. And they do that. The best story like that, I was having lunch with Steve Johnson one time. And this guy came over to our table, and he was kind of embarrassed. And he said, excuse me, sir, but I know you're somebody. And we've got a bet at my table as to who you are. Can you tell me who you are? And Steve said, well, for half the bet, I'll be anybody you want me to be. Best answer I ever heard.
So what's the difference for you in being involved in the athletic world for college versus professionals?
You know, they're people. They're all people just like you and I. They have the same kind of problems that we have, whether it's in college or pros or FCA with high school kids. They're people. The professional athletes have one problem I've found that most of us have never had. The minute they sign that contract, they suddenly have family they didn't even know they had. People are coming out of the woodwork, lost cousins, and demanding part of the contract, demanding money, demanding help. My brother has never demanded money from me at all. I doubt if you've had that experience. Russell doesn't do that to you, does he?
No, he does not.
Okay, but these guys get it all the time. That's the one difference that I've found in dealing with professional athletes. And for 29 years, I served as a volunteer staff at conferences for Pro Athletes Outreach. We did football conference in February, baseball in November, motor racing for about 10 years. And it's the same with all of them. And it's not just a kid coming out of a poverty area growing up. It's kids coming out of maybe, well, someplace like Lake Oswego. It doesn't matter what their background, what their economic background is. When they sign that big contract, people want part of it.
Well, I love you. Our families have been together forever. But with this, I just want to thank you for your time. And if anyone wants to reach out to you and just have you come speak or talk, then we're going to put your name and email down there. They can reach out to you.
Sure.
Is that okay?
You bet. I'm available. I'll go anywhere as the Lord leads and as it fits my schedule. I'm committed to it.
Blessings to you.
Thank you, Steve. Bless you.
Yep.